Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie, and in this video I'm going to be looking at the weekend of September the 13th and 14th, 2025. This weekend there is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury, and this is perhaps one of the most important events of the week, and I do want to look at this conjunction in some detail. You know, Mercury is now combust. It's getting really close to the Sun, and when it's exactly conjunct the Sun, it is said to be cazimi, and cazimi does represent an area of controversy in astrology. You know, some astrologers will say that when the Sun and Mercury are really close, Mercury can benefit. You know, because it and the Sun are on the same wavelength. Though there is another view that when the Sun and Mercury are exactly conjunct, Mercury is completely burnt out. But I will be looking at this Sun-Mercury conjunction, and I'll be looking at some examples of events which took place when the Sun and Mercury, you know, were right together. So before I look at the Sun and Mercury, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend. So here is the chart for the weekend. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So this chart is set for midnight on Sunday the 14th, right in the middle of the weekend. And the moon is at 18 Gemini, so it's a moon in Gemini time for us. I mean, the moon does sort of eventually go into Cancer. I mean, I think it goes into Cancer sort of Monday morning, as far as I can see on that would be the 15th. So moon goes into Cancer on the 15th at sort of 1:30 in the morning London time. So that does mean if you're in the Americas right at the end of a weekend, the moon will go into Cancer. But I think that, you know, overall it is a moon in Gemini weekend, and the moon, you know, as it goes through Gemini, it makes a few sort of aspects of interest. You can see that the moon is applying to a trine of Mars, and you know, moon in Gemini, trine Mars in Libra. I mean, that's quite an energetic combination, and so that should you know, get things moving. And you know, it is though in air signs. It's not in fire signs, and so the emphasis might be more on sort of ideas and things taking place in theory rather than in reality. Although, you know, we do have Venus in a fire sign. We do have, you know, Venus in Leo, and the moon is making a sextile to Venus. So you've got Venus and Mars, you know, coming together, and the moon sort of helping out. So in fact, if you look at it, Venus is getting pretty close to the sextile of Mars. It's, you know, in the middle of a weekend, Venus is around a degree from the sextile. So I think, you know, many of us may pick up on Venus sextile Mars. I mean, Venus sextile Mars is an aspect that I would have said is, you know, pretty good. It's about attraction, people getting on with each other, and can be sort of quite charismatic. So if you're trying to persuade someone, you know, of how wonderful you are, then with that Venus sextile Mars, you might you know, be able to do a good job. And so if there's anyone we want to attract, then yeah, that Venus sextile Mars might be useful. But you know, the main aspect this weekend, or you know, the most important aspect, is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. So this Sun-Mercury conjunction, you know, arguably sort of dominates the weekend, and I will be going into detail about this conjunction sort of later in the video. But briefly, I would have said that, you know, Mercury is a planet of thought and communication, what we're thinking about, the way we process information. And yeah, it is in Virgo. Mercury is Mercury works extremely well in Virgo. But that conjunction with the Sun, I'm not convinced that it's a good thing. I think it does weaken Mercury. The Sun is, it's a powerful force. It's the center of the solar system, and there's sort of poor Mercury getting blasted by the Sun. Now, there is this idea of a cazimi conjunction, and that is, as I said in the introduction to this video, when the Sun and the Mercury are exactly conjunct. I think that's within 17 arc minutes. And in theory, it should improve Mercury's condition, because the Sun and Mercury are on the same wavelength. That means that there's a moment where the Sun, where Mercury can't be hurt by the Sun. But I do have my doubts, and I think that overall this weekend, we might be very clever with Mercury in Virgo, but there's still the possibility that we make mistakes. There's plenty of scope for misjudgment and for taking some things too seriously and other things not seriously enough. So that's the picture for the weekend, set at midnight on Sunday, set for New York. Here's a picture for Sydney, Australia. It's not such a different chart. The moon is obviously earlier in the sign. It's always going to be earlier in the sign. I think that, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, then perhaps some of those aspects, lunar aspects taking place sort of earlier in Gemini, could be more significant, like, for example, moon conjunct Uranus. So, on Saturday, if you are in Australasia, Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, then moon conjunct Uranus, it could stir things up, and it can be quite inspirational. Moon conjunct Uranus, and we might see things in a new way, and there might be sort of plenty of inspiration flying around. So that moon conjunct Uranus may say something about your weekend if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but by Saturday it will have moved off, and there'll be other things to think about. Probably Saturday, if you are in Australasia, is going to be more active than Sunday, but we'll have to see. So now I want to look at the heliocentric view, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. And we still have a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter this weekend, heliocentric conjunction, of course. And there it is, Venus and Jupiter together. Okay, it's not exact, but I do regard that Venus-Jupiter conjunction as being fortunate, and it might indicate that if we're prepared to be positive and to consider all the many things that could go our way if we gave it the chance, then we may be able to use that energy. I think the universe is telling us that it does want us to be happy and successful, provided we go about things in the right way, provided we focus on what we're supposed to be focusing on. Each of us have our individual destinies, and if we understand that, then the good luck inherent in that Venus-Jupiter conjunction, should start to manifest for us. And of course, Venus-Jupiter is about getting on with people and benefiting from people, and also enjoying ourselves and having a good time. So there is that possibility, though again it is a heliocentric conjunction, so I think that means that it's more cosmic, sort of less personal, and we're going to have to try harder if we want to make the most of it. And then there is Mercury. Mercury is starting to make an opposition to Saturn, and it has made an opposition to the Earth. And so there is Mercury. We have a very wide Earth-Saturn conjunction, and that is a reminder that the Earth is getting closer and closer to the conjunction of Saturn. I mean, from a geocentric view, that is Sun opposition Saturn, because Sun opposition Saturn geocentrically is the same as Earth conjunct Saturn heliocentrically. And that Earth-Saturn, we need to pay attention to that. I mean, I know that it's an aspect that happens once a year, but we also know that it's a difficult time, that things are chaotic. And of course, what happens is that we've got the equinox happening in about a week's time, and at the time of the equinox, the Sun will be at 0 degrees Libra, Saturn will be at almost 0 degrees Aries, not quite, it'll be in very late Pisces. So we know we're running into Sun opposition Saturn, and that opposition Saturn takes place very close to the equinox. And so that Earth conjunct Saturn is just giving us some extra information, and it's allowing us to see something in a different way. And Earth conjunct Saturn, that really brings it home. I do think that over the weekend, sorry, not over this weekend, but over the equinox weekend. I don't know what day of the week the equinox is, but we know it's in about a week's time, and so we need to start preparing for that. And so now this weekend, over the next couple of days, Mercury starting to move towards that opposition to Saturn. It's starting to bring something into focus, and perhaps we're getting some clues about what might be happening over the weekend. And it is again, it's over the weekend of the equinox. So just to make this clear, the equinox is on the 21st, 22nd. So the 21st of September, which is a Sunday or Monday. So we've got sort of over a week to go before that happens. But it happens at the same time as a new moon, that partial eclipse. So we need to be very aware of it, and I will be talking about it in greater detail very soon. So that's a heliocentric picture, and now I want to look at the weekend from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of September the 13th and 14th, 2025. Aries. Things are starting to move more. Over the last couple of days, maybe Thursday, Friday, things could have felt as if they were rather slow. Perhaps there were just things you had to take care of, or you might also have felt that people just weren't on particularly good form. But now with the moon moving into Gemini, I think that things are getting easier, and they're getting more exciting, and there are more sort of possibilities for movement and variety. And if you feel that you want to go somewhere, perhaps you want to meet people, or there's something you want to do that might be exciting, something to pique your curiosity, then you can do it. You can sort of move freely, and other people, I think, are probably going to be more welcoming than they have been in a recent past. So Aries, don't restrict yourself, and if there's something you've been working on, thinking about, now might be the time when you can talk about it, discuss it, tell people what's on your mind. In a recent past, they might not have been particularly receptive to your ideas, but things are changing, and it's always good to get some feedback. And now is a time when you can get that feedback. And Aries, if there's anyone you've been meaning to talk to, then this weekend might be the perfect time to do it, because I think it's not just you that are becoming more open-minded, but other people as well. And so think about everyone around you who you could interact with, but perhaps in the past haven't, and now see if you can make up for lost time. And the moon, while it's in Gemini, is making a trine to Mars. So moon trine Mars, that is a great aspect. And it affects you directly because Mars is your ruler. And perhaps that just says something about the way you present yourself. People like you, and it's quite possible that they find you attractive. And one reason for that is that Venus is starting to make a sextile to Mars. Now that Venus sextile Mars, I don't think it's exact this weekend, but it's pretty close. I mean, Venus and Mars, this aspect, it does take a long time to perfect, because Venus and Mars are going at reasonably similar speeds. And so Venus sextile Mars is about you being able to present yourself in the best possible way. And presentation isn't just about looking at yourself in a mirror. It's about what you present, and it's a kind of energy you produce. And I think that at the moment you come over as being an energetic person. I mean, perhaps you were always an energetic person, but things have changed. Perhaps recently you seem to be unusual, or people might have found you threatening, and now you haven't changed, but everyone else has changed, and you can be yourself. And if you've got ideas, then feel free to express them. But it might also be about you. And Venus sextile Mars is a classic relationship aspect. So relationships can potentially exceed your expectations. I mean, one doesn't want to create any expectations as far as relationships are concerned, but if you're trying to forge new links with another person, then I think that you can be very successful. And it just seems that the time is right. And we're talking about the kind of relationship that isn't necessarily super emotional. It's more about excitement and inspiration and conversation, and just knowing that you and another person are on the same wavelength. And so overall, Aries, I think that this weekend does look pretty good. Taurus. Venus is making a sextile to Mars. Now, this sextile is, it's getting closer and closer. So Venus, your ruler, starting to hit that aspect, that exact aspect. And this Venus sextile Mars is, I think, pretty energizing. And it allows you to not just be yourself, but to just get on with everyone, but in a way that is really quite sort of dynamic. And yeah, you are dynamic. You might not want to be dynamic. There might be things that you just want to concentrate on. You, for example, it's a time when many Taurians might be bothered about the material world, about money, making sure that the bills can be paid. The moon is in Gemini after all, a part of your chart which is often connected with finances. But that's not the whole story. And I think that this Venus sextile Mars just allows you to not just to be yourself, but to project yourself in your own way. You don't have to make any changes. You don't have to go out of your way to force anything onto other people. You just make it clear that this is how you want things to be. And I think that people are going to listen. And Taurus, in a verbal sense, you're going to be very open and direct. And if something is important to you, you'll be able to get the words out, and those words are going to be powerfully spoken. And there could be times when you feel just ever so slightly angry, but anger in a constructive way. You decide that something has to be said, and and people listen, and this, it might be about the way you want things done. And Taurians can sometimes keep things to themselves. They don't want to necessarily express everything, and then of course they can get angry if things don't go their way. But with this Venus sextile Mars, you can inform everyone of your opinions at an early stage. So if something is being organized or developed over the weekend, then make sure that you have an input, and you will find that people will listen to you, because what you don't want to do is do nothing this weekend while other people are sorting something out, and then you do nothing, and then it's all been sorted out, it's a fait accompli, and then you've got plenty of things to complain about. But you need, Taurus, to sort of move yourself into the center of things, at an early stage. And sometimes, Taurus, that's not something you want to do. You just prefer to just hold back, and you might be concerned about how people are going to respond to you, but there's no need to be concerned. And it may be that you would prefer to do nothing, that you would prefer to just stay where you are, but that might not be a reasonable option. And also do consider your social environment. There is a sextile between Venus and Mars. Venus and Mars is an aspect that is often connected with relationships working, and in your own way you can be very successful at drawing people in, and you come over as someone who has got things to offer. And one thing you've got to offer is stability. You come over as someone who is a safe pair of hands, and we do live in difficult times when people want stability, and with this Venus sextile Mars, it's very clear that you can most certainly provide it. Gemini. The big aspect today is a conjunction between the Sun. Sorry, when I say today, the weekend, the big aspect over the weekend is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. Now, this conjunction could be difficult, because what it means is that the Sun is getting really, really close to Mercury. You could say that you're sort of burnt up by it. I mean, not literally burnt up, but you might find yourself to be overwhelmed, or you're sort of exhausted, or you can't fully make sense of things. And that's something you need to be aware of. We know that Gemini is a sign that has lots of ideas. There's always something going on in your brain, and so you might think that that's good news, that you are like that. But sometimes you can catch yourself out. You can focus on the wrong things, or decide that you want to do something on the basis of what you think is good information, but that information turns out to be faulty. So with this Sun conjunct Mercury, I would suggest that you show some humility. You haven't got all the answers. You might think you've got all the answers. You might think you know everything, but the Sun conjunct Mercury might indicate that you don't, and you might quite literally be confusing yourself. I mean, it's not a situation where you should be blaming other people. Just you might be in a state of mind where you're feeling so sure of yourself that you just you can't think of other alternatives. And so I think that in many cases this Sun Mercury conjunction is just it's too self-referential. You are referring everything to yourself, to your own subjective experience, and then as a result of that, you really could trip yourself up. And that's in spite of the fact that the moon is in Gemini. So, moon is in Gemini. That's a great place of the moon. The moon is making a trine to Mars. So in many respects, it could be a good weekend, but it's just important that you don't make any important decisions. You don't reach any conclusions. You don't think that, oh, everything's okay. You understand everything. Therefore, you can sign on the dotted line. No, it's not a weekend for making commitments. And if you do make commitments, the basis of those commitments is just not going to be very solid. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that it's going to necessarily be a bad weekend. I think that you can, in your own quiet way, be quite fortunate. Again, you just can't make any decisions. Just see what is available. See what's going on. Don't overthink it. And that's perhaps the issue. You might make decisions about what you're going to do, and you decide you're going to follow a particular path, and you refuse to accept alternatives. And it's not just that path might be taking you into sort of dangerous territory. It might also be the case that path is steering you away from good fortune. Good fortune is there somewhere, and so perhaps you need to think about what is available, and you mustn't be too confident in yourself and your particular view. And I would suggest, Gemini, that you don't spend too long in just as one place, that you do give yourself a lot of variety, and that you're able to move around with subtlety, with a light touch. I mean, I think that's the importance, a light touch. Because the moment you start making a decision, the moment you decide that you've got it, then that's a sure sign that something is not right. So it's difficult, because Gemini is a sign that can do a lot of thinking, and you can think things out of existence, and you can persuade yourself that a particular course of action is right, and somehow you've got to get around that. So it requires a particular state of mind this weekend, and you don't want to get stuck. So you can kind of alight, but as soon as you alight, you must be ready to move to the next thing. So just keep constant activity, but it shouldn't be very committal, and that's the way to handle this weekend. And it's very difficult, but if you get it right, I think that it can be a fortunate weekend where you find that there's plenty going on, plenty to amuse you, and you may have more than your fair share of good luck. Cancer. Right now, Cancer, you are able to sort of look at things quite objectively. You can put yourself in a position where you don't have to make any real commitments. And like Gemini, this is what I was saying the same thing to Gemini. I don't think Gemini I don't think it is a weekend where most of us should be making commitments. And that certainly applied to Gemini, and it certainly, I think, applies to you, Cancer. And you do have the ability to look at things from afar and just make the decision that you don't want to be involved. Why should you want to be involved? Some things are just too complicated, or they're just not really anything you feel that is going to be good for you. And sort of that is where the Cancerian sensitivity comes in. If you feel that something is difficult, then you're probably right, and it should be left alone. Though, in your own way, Cancer, you are certainly able to look after yourself. You're going to be able to decide where your best interests lie, without really having to think about it. It's just going to be obvious. And so Cancer, don't feel that you have to do anything, and probably you're going to be sort of most effective in your own home, or somewhere that you know and trust. And there may be temptations to go further afield, but I think that these temptations should probably be avoided. But when you are somewhere that you feel comfortable, then in your own way you can be quite active, but you're being active on your terms. The moon is making a trine to Mars. It's also making a sextile to Venus. So moon aspecting Venus and Mars, that shows that from your particular vantage point, you have control, and you also have control over other people. You can attract their attention, and there is something about you that is attractive, even mysterious because Cancer, I don't think that you're prepared to reveal very much. There are things you do want to keep to yourself. That can be a Cancerian trait. Cancerians, if you think about it, Cancer, the symbol of a Cancer is a crab with its sort of hard shell, and you understand, but it's a dangerous world out there, and so there are things you want to keep quiet about, and the energy you are using to keep quiet about things is perhaps obvious. People can see that you're holding something back, and they don't resent you for it. They just perhaps find it rather attractive and appealing, and they kind of want to know more. And perhaps you can give people some scraps of information, but you don't have to give them everything. Leo, a fortunate weekend in many cases, and it is a weekend where you're going to feel pretty good about yourself. You'll know that you're on the right track, and at the same time you're going to get a degree of sort of support and even validation from other people. So when you're with people, you come over as someone who is confident and who is also versatile. You're able to discuss many different things, and you can understand the situation as it is evolving, and be clear about your views. People will listen to you, and so whatever you have to say, well, now you could say it, but you do have to be careful, because there is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury over the weekend. So this Sun conjunct Mercury, well, the Sun is your ruler, and it is conjunct Mercury. So you could say logically that means that you can talk, and you can keep talking, and that's good, and people are definitely going to notice. But you have to think about how much you are talking, and whether you may perhaps be crowding someone out. Mercury could be representative of another person. It could be representative of the facts that you don't fully want to recognize. And so don't assume with Sun conjunct Mercury that you know everything, or that you're more significant than others. People have different things to say, and people have different views, and you've got to hear everyone out. I mean, you expect to be listened to, and that's absolutely reasonable. But by the same token, it's important that you listen to them, and you don't crowd anyone out, and you don't cut people off in mid-sentence, especially if they're saying something important. And it might be that someone is trying to tell you something of material importance. It could be about money, for example, or some administrative detail that you haven't really taken too seriously, and they're trying to tell you, but you might not listen. So give everyone a chance, and to say what is on their mind. It's not going to take much effort, but you don't want to be too full of yourself, and you don't want to be in a situation where your own logic is overridden by your ego. I mean, I don't want to make too much of that. I think that in general, Leo, it's a good weekend. I think that, as I've already said, I think you're quite lucky, and you're also enthusiastic. People need enthusiasm, and you're able to look at things in the best possible light. You can see opportunities, and you want to share these opportunities. And okay, you might get some feedback. Perhaps you've made some miscalculations, and that's why you need to listen to people. You haven't got all the answers. You've got most of the answers, but you don't want to get completely overwhelmed by your own ego, because I think that would be unnecessary, and it would spoil the weekend. And it is a weekend that should be pretty good when you can enjoy yourself, and you can help other people enjoy themselves. So you can be a force for good, and people will gravitate towards you, and you just don't want to be just too obsessed with your own importance, because as I've said, that would spoil things. Virgo. Mercury is making a conjunction to the Sun. And so the question is this weekend, what does that mean? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? So you could say that Mercury is making a conjunction to the Sun in Virgo, which is your sign. And so that allows you to very much be yourself and be very clear about who you are, and also being confident about your ideas and how your ideas are developing. You might really think, Virgo, that you've got all the answers, and it's true that you can speak with confidence, but the question is, are you maybe too confident? Because Mercury is combust. It's overwhelmed. The Sun represents something which is preventing you from seeing the reality of the situation. And it might be that it's your own subjectivity. You possibly pride yourself on being logical and being objective, but there can be moments, Virgo, when you see things completely in terms of yourself and your past, and even your sort of emotional experiences, and this just prevents you from seeing the truth. So when you look at what's happening around you, when you judge what's happening around you, don't assume that you've got it right, and don't be too confident. I mean, it's good to be confident, and I'm certainly not trying to knock your confidence. I'm not trying to make you have doubts about yourself, but it just could be that there's something you haven't got right. And maybe with the Sun and the Mercury making a conjunction to the South Node, there's a risk here that you might be framing everything in terms of yourself, and you're not considering, alternative views. And it's not just your issue. If you listen to all my 12 signs, I'm certainly not recommending you do that, but if you were to listen to all of my 12 signs, this is a common theme. This is something I am talking about, that you do have to consider, alternative views. And the fact that the North Node is in Pisces is strongly emphasized at the moment, because the Virgo South Node is still conjunct the Sun and Mercury, and so the way forward, North Node in Pisces, is to give consideration to other people. That's not the same as being selfless or for making a big sacrifice. It's not the same as that. It's just being aware that there are other people out there. They have their own views, and they have power, and they can make things happen. And if you're dismissive, Virgo, and you think you can frame everything in terms of yourself, then that could be very dangerous. Now, while all this is going on, we do have it's a last quarter moon. And so the last quarter moon, is it a last quarter moon? Well, we've got hold on, let me get this right. So we've just had a full moon, so we've got a new moon coming up, so this is a last quarter moon. And this last quarter moon over the weekend is relevant to you. And so in about a week's time, we've got a new moon, which takes place in 2029 Virgo. This is a month, at least the astrological month, where there are two new moons in Virgo, because you had a new moon on the 23rd of August at 0 degrees Virgo, and then on the 21st, 22nd of September, there's another new moon coming up at 29 degrees Virgo. And this last quarter moon is very much affecting you, because you've got the moon in Gemini square the sun in Virgo, and it might be a situation where you become aware that something absolutely has to be done. Remember, the last quarter moon is like the final crisis of the lunar cycle. It's that moment in the lunar cycle where you're thinking, well, if I don't do it now, it's just not going to happen. And with the Sun in Virgo, Moon in Gemini, very high profile section of your chart, Virgo, you might be thinking that even though it is a weekend, that there's something very concrete you need to do. It may relate to your ambitions, and it suddenly becomes almost like the most important thing in the world, and you can't relax, and you have to decide, what is it that you need to do? Now, that is fortunate, because I think that you have the ability to think positively and to be aware of the various opportunities. But as I've been talking about, the Sun is conjunct Mercury, so your decision making is not always going to be great certainly over the weekend, and so it's good that you have the impulse to do something, that something needs to be done, and that you're in a mode for acting and certainly planning. But that doesn't mean to say that you're going to get everything right. So what do you do? I think what you could do is make the most of other people. Be ready to listen to other people's advice. Don't think that you know it all. And if you get advice from another person, someone you trust, someone who's got a good track record, that might give you a new perspective. And you might not like what you hear, but it does seem that that something has to be done. And if you act in the right way, you're not too hasty, and you're prepared to listen, then I think that you can really make the most of this last quarter energy. Sagittarius. There are quite a few things going on at a number of different levels, and one thing that you probably can't avoid is other people. I mean, the moon is moving through Gemini, it's your opposite sign, and so that does give you a degree of sensitivity. You know that you have to take into account what other people are thinking and feeling, and what their attitude is, and what their mood is. And with the moon making a trine to Mars, I think that you have the capacity to be quite motivating. And if you're trying to inspire people, or you're trying to get them to cheer up, look at things in a different way, I think that you can be reasonably successful. But you do have to accept that not everyone is on great form. There is a conjunction at the moment between the Sun and Mercury, and Mercury could be representative of other people, the people in your life, and the Sun is being conjunct Mercury. It just may be that there are people out there who feel as if there's a great weight on their shoulders, or that something is blinding them. They can't see what's going to happen. They're afraid. And, with this fear, well, what do? Well, you can't push people more than they can handle, and you have to take things at other people's pace. But I think that this is something you can do. I think you're going to be very good at understanding people's weaknesses, and being able to go with it, and you can provide a degree of encouragement, but you do have to know your limits. Everyone has their limits, and I think that today, rather this weekend, those limits are going to be very clear. Now, the Sun is conjunct Mercury, and that conjunction between the Sun and Mercury may say something about other people, as I've just said, and it may indicate that not everyone is on great form. But there's another way of looking at that Sun conjunct Mercury. You could say, well, that Sun conjunct Mercury is in Virgo. It's in a mutable sign. It's in a high-profile sign from a Sagittarius perspective, and there is an argument for saying that the Sun-Mercury conjunction is cazimi. So because it's cazimi, it's the Sun and Mercury are 17 arc minutes apart or closer, but somehow the Sun and the Mercury are running into each other, and Mercury, rather, instead of being damaged by the Sun, is being boosted by the Sun. So there could be moments over the weekend, Sagittarius, of real clarity. And I think you'll know when they're happening. It could be everything is very confused. It's out of focus. But then there may be a moment of precision where everything comes into focus, where everything is absolutely clear. This is not just about other people. It's about you and about what you want to do. And perhaps there have been times when you have kind of known that you should be doing something, but you haven't been doing it, and you've perhaps been searching for a direction, or you might have known your broad direction, but there were just a few details that didn't make sense. But now, you are getting clarity, and this might also be a link with the fact that it is a last quarter moon. Moon in Gemini, square the Sun in Virgo, and it just feels that something has to give. And then there is a question of, what do you need to do to see it through? And it is possible that in order to see something through, relating to your overall ambition, you might need to engage someone's help. And it may just be one other person. And ideally you might have thought that, you could do it on your own, but maybe not. And maybe that's part of the meaning of the moon being in Gemini, moon being in your opposite sign. And don't forget, Uranus is still in Gemini. And so perhaps that Uranus, from a positive perspective, is talking about how you need to be challenged by someone else, by perhaps a group of people, but you haven't got all the answers. And you know you haven't got all the answers. And with this moment of clarity, you can perhaps see, what you have to do and who you have to make contact with. Capricorn. There is a situation where the Sun is conjunct Mercury in Virgo. And of course, Virgo is an earth sign, and it's a sign that you have a sympathy with. And so this Sun Mercury conjunction, it may be a two-edged sword. I mean, on one hand, the Sun Mercury conjunction may allow you to see things like you've never seen them before, especially if you subscribe to the view that the Sun Mercury conjunction, the exact Sun Mercury conjunction, is fortunate because it's cazimi. So the idea being that when the Sun and Mercury are within 17 arc minutes of one another, that somehow they're on the same wavelength, that the Sun can't hurt Mercury. And with this cazimi conjunction between the Sun and the Mercury, you might have been struggling to understand something, and then it makes sense. And it's not about your ambitions, it's more about your overall philosophical stance. And so you might have increasing confidence that you've got your ideas sorted out, and if there have been mistakes in the past, or you've got something wrong, or something hadn't made sense, then maybe with this Sun Mercury conjunction you could feel that it's now coming together. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. There is an alternative view of the Sun Mercury conjunction that says, well, this cazimi effect, it doesn't really amount to much. The closer the Sun and Mercury get to each other, the more problematic the aspect is. And this weekend, with the Sun conjunct Mercury, it's possible, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's possible that you get the wrong idea about something. So you could get the right idea about something, absolutely. That's true, if your timing is right, if you're honest with yourself. But it's also possible that you get completely the wrong idea. You think you're onto something. You think that things are starting to make sense. And as a result, you reach a conclusion which, in the end will show itself to be completely erroneous. And what this perhaps highlights is the problem with having ideas. I mean, we think about ideas as being good things, but when ideas come together as part of a system, they can be like a straitjacket. We think that we've got all the solutions, whatever that overriding philosophy might be. I mean, you could think about it in terms of religion and politics. You might, for example, see everything from a Christian perspective, or from a Muslim perspective, or from a Marxist perspective, or a capitalist perspective. It's nice to have these labels, but these labels, they can be straitjackets, and we might see everything from one ideological or spiritual view, and as a result we could sort of gloss over contradictions. And so what you have to do, Capricorn, is really open your eyes, and if you see a contradiction, then you've got to jump on this contradiction. You've got to not sweep it under the carpet. Contradiction should be welcomed, because they may point to a deeper problem, and one contradiction can lead to another contradiction, and that can lead to the downfall of a set of ideas or a particular philosophy. And so, I mean, I know that this is a bit sort of abstract, and it's just a weekend, isn't it? And I don't think that most Capricorns are going to have a philosophical or religious crisis over the weekend. And perhaps, instead, Capricorn, what you need to be thinking about is just making sure that everything is in order. Perhaps you shouldn't have big ideas, and instead you should look at things in terms of the here and now, one moment to another. And there is a last quarter moon, and so this last quarter moon is a moment of crisis. That's how I like to see it. The lunation cycle that started on August the 23rd is coming to a close. There's a week left of it, and you may be trying to make sense of it. And perhaps the best way of making sense of it is not necessarily just to develop your ideas or try to develop a philosophical stance, but to be more grounded about it and to think about what needs to be changed. And you can see that some things are chaotic, and perhaps if you want to really understand something, then you need to make sure that everything is clear. Stop worrying about what other people are doing, what's going on in the world. Think about your particular space and making sure that your own space is as comprehensible as possible. And that might require some work, some thinking, and you want things to be straightforward, and that perhaps should be your priority. Aquarius. The moon is still in Gemini, and from an Aquarian perspective, it's always good when the moon is in Gemini, particularly as it's trine Mars. So we've got moon trine Mars in air signs, and so that has an impact on you because you're an Aquarius, you're an air sign. So moon is trine the sign Aquarius, Mars is trine the sign Aquarius. So there is a sort of a grand trine in air energy to the weekend, and so there could be sort of an emphasis on ideas and what you do with ideas, and thinking about your particular stance. And it's not just your ideas, it's other people's ideas as well. I mean, so it's a time to be sort of listening and interacting and trying to make sense of the world. And because how do you make sense of the world? I mean, there are so many things going on, there are so many inputs that we can't deal with it all. And instead, we need a script. We need some kind of way, a method of sorting it all out. And of course, that's why we have ideas and philosophies and systems. And as I was just talking about that to Capricorn, and so that's what it is about. And perhaps now is a time when you can be starting to fine-tune some of your ideas and some of your larger systems, ways of analysis, and so that might be an approach. But the question is, how much can you trust other people? There is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury this weekend, and the Sun in an Aquarian chart can be representative of the other, someone else in your life. And because the Sun is conjunct Mercury, you might find that people have a lot to say for themselves. I mean, that makes logical sense, doesn't it? If Mercury is right next to the Sun, then Mercury is a planet of communication. It has a lot to say for itself, and you might find that some people are really quite analytical. I mean, they have been quite analytical recently, but it's now with Sun exactly conjunct Mercury, it kind of might really be noticeable. And, if you find that other people are talking a lot, then, what do you do? I mean, you could just listen, and it's sort of is perhaps amusing. It might be fun. I mean, you're trying to work out your own stance, your own ideas, and listening to what other people are saying is all very well. But yeah, you do have to be careful, because other people may be claiming that they're objective, that they're not allowing emotional material to influence their thoughts and their outputs. But there is no such thing as real objectivity. And if you hear people talking and arguing, then ask yourself why, or what's the reason? Why do they hold the opinions they hold? Is it out of principle, or is there some ulterior motive? And so don't be too trusting over the course of a weekend. It's easier to trust people, but I don't think it's a weekend where you can really take people at face value. Now, that means that perhaps the problem is people, and if you're not around people, if you're a free spirit, then it's going to be a much easier weekend. I think if there are problems, they're going to be social problems. And yeah, you might enjoy someone's company up to a point, but then it may not continue like that, and you may find that people in general just become a pain. So always sort of value your independence, and that also links with the fact that we've got a last quarter moon. I mean, we've got one week left before the new moon, before the partial eclipse, and I think that partial eclipse is on the 21st, 22nd. So that's close. This partial eclipse, it is on the 21st. Yeah, so this full moon may represent just a brief moment of uncertainty, where you are not sure what to do, and you may have doubts about yourself and your own ideas, and about your own creativity, and you may have doubts, and those doubts may be intensified by other people's input. And perhaps that is another good reason why you should have a weekend where you are as independent as possible. Pisces, you may not feel that you really need to be doing anything. I mean, why? I mean, what is the point? I mean, this weekend, your energy does seem to be focusing on yourself and your own private interests, and you're going to be happiest when you have control. And that could mean that the fewer people around you, the better, or at least you want to be respected. And if you aim to have a socially busy weekend, then are you going to be respected? You're going to have to sort of give in to other people's demands and try to make them happy. And don't forget, we've got a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury, and this conjunction between the Sun and Mercury is taking place close to the South Node. And as I have been saying over the last week, the South Node is something you should be moving away from. And so the question is, how do you create this kind of distance? And one thing we do have this weekend is a last quarter moon. So the moon is in Gemini, it's square the Sun in Virgo, and it's not just square the Sun in Virgo, it's square the nodal axis. And so you've got the North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo, but then you've got the moon hitting the nodal axis and kind of making a T-square, but it's making the T-square at the time of the last quarter moon. And so Pisces, this might be a time when you really need to think about other people, every single person you're involved with. It's almost like this weekend might require a social audit. So think about yourself, think about every person who has an influence on you in your life, every person you're meeting, just everything. And, ask yourself, how's it going? Which people do you need? Which people are holding you back? Which people are perhaps taking you in the wrong direction? And the last quarter just can be a moment of decision, a final moment of decision. We've got this period where the sun is moving through Virgo. We had a new moon in Virgo on the 23rd of August. We've got a new moon in Virgo on the 21st. So it's very encapsulated with by Virgo this time, 2 new moons. And what happens between those 2 new moons. And for you, Pisces, it should be about other people and how you relate to them, which goes back to this idea of a social audit. And so perhaps you should just make decisions. And it's not just decisions about people you need to distance yourself from. It may be that there are people who you haven't paid enough attention to, who have been on the periphery, but now perhaps you need to bring them in. And, it is a solo decision. You can't really get any help here. You have to make your own decisions, and you have to be selfish. And it's not a time to be spending too much time listening to what anyone has to say. I mean, no one really has the answers. I mean, they might claim to have the answers, but they don't. In fact, other people right now, particularly the people you know best, they can't see the wood for the trees, and they might sound convincing, but they're not. Well, they shouldn't be. Sorry, they might sound convincing, but they don't really have any real idea. And if anyone has an idea, it's you. And I think, Pisces, it is a weekend where you're very much able to make the right decisions, particularly about other people and their relative value. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and now I want to look at the weekend from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 21, biting through. And there are no moving lines. And this indicates that it might be a difficult weekend, particularly a difficult weekend if you have to relate to other people. I was just doing the forecast for Pisces, and I was telling Pisces that it would be a good time to do a social audit, just considering everyone in Piscean's life and deciding to what extent they're needed, how relevant they are. But what I said to Pisces may actually relate to all of us, regardless of our sign, with biting through. Biting through is a hexagram about penalties and how we treat people who have behaved badly. And biting through, does indicate the possibility of rehabilitation, because the idea is that there is gold which is surrounded by hard leather, and you have to get through that leather. And that means you've got people who are fundamentally good, but on the outside, things have gone wrong. They've fallen into bad habits, but perhaps they can be reformed. I mean, that is a way of looking at biting through. And then we have to think about everyone we have to interact with and whether they're doing us any good, and whether they're behaving correctly. And biting through might also apply to us. We may be quite tough on ourselves and looking at the mistakes we've made, and at the same time being aware of our own gold. And so, when you're talking about this kind of hexagram, which is about punishment and justice, then we have to start with ourselves. I mean, it's not a good idea to go blaming other people just because it's easier, more comfortable. I mean, I think it's going to be easy to blame other people, because remember that this weekend there's an exact conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. And so this conjunction between the Sun and Mercury is very subjective. We can't see the wood for the trees. We're very into our particular view, and we can get obsessed with our view, and we might blame other people. So there is perhaps that tendency there with biting through. Who's making the mistakes? Is it us making the mistakes, or is it someone else? Okay, everyone might be making a mistake, but then our first job is to deal with ourselves and potentially what we are doing wrong. And we certainly shouldn't be trying to achieve very much this weekend, because there are no moving lines here, and the nuclear hexagram of biting through is hexagram number 39, which is obstruction. It's going to be difficult to make progress this weekend, and we certainly shouldn't be trying to move forward. At best, we should stay where we are. It might even be better to retreat and work out where things have been done wrong, whether it's by other people or whether it's by us. And there's nothing that has to be done. There are no moving lines. And I'd love to be more positive, but I think just on the basis of the I Ching, I think it could be quite a frustrating weekend. I don't think it's going to be a dangerous weekend, simply because there are no moving lines. It's like just nothing is happening, and that's just the way it is. So let me now finish with the conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. There is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. Here is let's see, where is the chart for the Sun-Mercury conjunction? It's here. So this is the precise moment in which the Sun and Mercury become exactly conjunct. So you can see that it's at 20:55 Virgo. So that takes place London time, sort of 11:52 a.m. So it'll be sort of later in the day if you're in the Americas. If you're in the Americas, if you're in the Americas, that's going to be earlier in the day, isn't it? That's going to be very early morning. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, it will be very sort of the end of Saturday. But I'm not sure if we should worry too much about the precise timing. But there is this question about what it means for the Sun to be conjunct Mercury, and whether or not it's a good thing. There is this theory in astrology about the cazimi conjunction, when the Sun and Mercury are within 17 arc minutes of each other, but somehow Mercury doesn't get damaged by the Sun. It's on the same wavelength as the Sun, and it's kind of got this special power. I kind of have this image with cazimi Mercury of this person walking through the flames, and you'd think that they'd be burnt up, and provided they get out of the flames before the Sun and Mercury start separating too much, they're safe. So they've got to watch the clock. They've got to watch the ephemeris as they're walking through the flames. There's a moment of safety while the Sun and Mercury are exactly conjunct, but as you move away, that safety is lost, and you could get burnt up. So that's the Sun-Mercury conjunction, and perhaps in its sort of negative light. And I think it is, by and large, negative. I mean, I think this cazimi thing, in practice, looking at various charts, I'm completely unconvinced by it. Now, it may be if you're doing something very traditional, like if you're doing a horary chart, and you're following the rules of William Lilly, and you see that the Mercury is cazimi conjunction, then maybe you can use it. But I think that on a sort of a day-to-day level, I don't think that Sun conjunct Mercury, even if, well, particularly cazimi conjunction, I'm not convinced it's particularly fortunate, and I think it might be super unfortunate. I think that really is possible. Now, this Sun Mercury conjunction, it's conjunct the South Node as well. This particular conjunction between the Sun and Mercury, and I think that this conjunction could be about people just reaching the wrong conclusions. Even though the Sun, Mercury is in Virgo, great place for Mercury to be, but conjunct the South Node, it's about perhaps people being too clever by half. Yeah, they might have done their research, they might have got their facts right, they may think they've got their facts right, but just because you've got everything right doesn't mean you're going to get it right. You might just, in the end, reach the wrong conclusions, or the past is too strong. What was happening in the past, that's the South Node is the past, and the pull of the past is so strong that we can't resist it, and we just make the wrong decision. So it could be like we really research something, we've done good research, and our research is pointing in a particular direction, but even then we go in the opposite direction because we just can't handle the truth. And this Sun Mercury conjunction, I think with this, the Sun, one point about the Sun South Node conjunction, I think that a lot of it is things coming up from the past, and I'm just looking at what's been happening over the week. People's past catching up with them, and you think in Britain we've got the former sort of ambassador, British ambassador Peter Mandelson, and he was forced out because of his association with Jeffrey Epstein, and writing this 10 pages into Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book. So the past sort of comes up, and it seems the past does seem to be quite strong. I don't know how you felt about the last week, but I think that's how I've been thinking about the Sun conjunct the South Node. But it involves Mercury as well, and so I think that there's a lot of possibilities of making the wrong decision. Even though we try very hard, we think we've covered every fact, but we haven't. Well, we might have covered every fact, but we just reached the wrong conclusions because we can't handle the future. So that may be one way of looking at it. So I just wanted to finish by looking at some examples of what happens when the Sun conjuncts Mercury. I'm not really going to look at specifically at people with Sun conjunct Mercury. I mean, I will be looking at a couple of people with Sun conjunct Mercury, but it's only because it relates to events. So if you have, for example, an exact Sun conjunct Mercury in your chart, if you have got Sun and Mercury, for example, within 1 degree of each other, you might have to be extra careful this weekend, even though this Sun Mercury conjunction may not aspect your Sun Mercury conjunction. You might be just sensitive to it. But I'm not predicting any sort of great disaster, or I'm not predicting any disaster. I'm just sort of pointing it out, as a possibility. So thinking about the kind of events that happened when the Sun is conjunct Mercury, this is of course a completely biased sample. I have my interests, and so I'm not saying that this necessarily means anything or tells us what's going to be happening this weekend. But one thing that happened with Sun conjunct Mercury on January the 22nd, 1901, was Queen Victoria died. She'd been on the throne since 1837, so this was a big deal for the British Empire when the Empress of India finally died. And so Sun conjunct Mercury, pretty close. It's not a cazimi conjunction, but getting quite close to quite close to being cazimi. And so Sun Mercury conjunction, you might see that as being about the news flow, about how people feel about the news, how they relate to the news, and from a British perspective, this was distressing, sad news. Of course, she was quite old, so she was expected to die anyway. So that's one kind of event that can happen with Sun conjunct Mercury. Though with this Sun conjunct Mercury, it's not like anyone made a mistake or anyone did anything disastrous. I mean, she was an old woman who died, and that's the way it was. And looking at another death was the death of what's his name, Roland Ratzenberger. I look at his chart quite often. I mean, it was a very sort of impressive chart, the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. This was a Grand Prix where Ayrton Senna also was killed on a different day. So so a racing driver with the sun. Yeah, this is a Sun conjunct Mercury. Look, when Ratzenberger died in a hospital in Bologna, the Sun and Mercury were exactly conjunct. They were six minutes apart, and so you could see Sun Mercury conjunction as being about poor judgment, because Mercury is the way you think. And if you're a racing car driver, I know this isn't a chart of the accident; it's a chart of his death. But I think that the Sun and Mercury were still pretty close at the time of his accident. So if you're racing around a circuit and the Sun is conjunct Mercury, and the Sun Mercury conjunct was in the same sign as the South Node, it wasn't exactly sort of conjunct. And look at this Jupiter. Here's Sun Mercury conjunction opposition Jupiter. So Jupiter was encouraging risky behavior. Jupiter can be excessive, and so that's one way in which the Sun Mercury conjunction can work. But as you can see, you do have to look at other planets in the chart, and then the sinking of the Titanic. I think this is a moment when the Titanic hit the iceberg. So the Sun and Mercury were within 1 degree of each other in Aries. So Sun Mercury in Aries, in a hurry to get something done, and the Sun Mercury conjunction is square Neptune, which is kind of appropriate, the planet of the sea. So you're in a hurry to get things done, Sun and Mercury in Aries, and you have an error of judgment. You can't see what's going on. So Mercury and Mercury's retrograde. So Mercury, you're trying to make a decision, and at the same time, you're trying to get to New York as fast as possible. So that is a way in which the Sun Mercury conjunction can work, and it kind of is sort of similar with the death of Ratzenberger. And continuing on a maritime theme, there is the Bayesian. So the Bayesian was this sort of private yacht that got hit by a major storm just over a year ago, and it was moored off sort of in Sicily, in Palermo, and it just sunk. I think it was maybe because the hatches weren't properly secured. But anyway, it was just totally destroyed. And at the time of the sinking, Sun was conjunct Mercury. It wasn't just conjunct Mercury, it was cazimi conjunct Mercury, and within 1 arc minute. And so I think this provides good evidence, this chart, that cazimi conjunction is not really as good as it's cut out to be. Although we do have to look at other planets in the chart. And in this case, the Sun-Mercury conjunction is square Uranus, so that is quite a dangerous aspect. Now, what if you've got a Sun Mercury conjunction in your horoscope? Does that make you vulnerable? So if we look at the horoscope of Hans Martin Schleyer. Hans Martin Schleyer was a German industrialist who was very much he was an anti-union man. He was in West Germany, and he tried to sort of bring industries together, and so obviously a man of the right. And he had a pretty unpleasant past. I think he'd been in the SS during the Second World War. and he was controversial. I mean, a lot of people hated him, not just because of his wartime past, but because he was a representative of industry, of the bosses, and so if you were from a left-wing perspective, he was not someone you would think much of. And Hans Martin Schleyer had a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury in his horoscope. There's his Sun Mercury horoscope. There's the Sun and the Mercury. So you could say that he was sensitive to the Sun Mercury conjunction. And on September the 5th, 1977, there was a Sun Mercury conjunction. And this was when he was abducted by the Baader-Meinhof gang. And so perhaps he was sensitive to the Sun-Mercury conjunction. And then a bit later, so that was on September the 5th, he was, on October the 18th, there was still a Sun-Mercury conjunction, not quite cazimi, and that was when he was killed. I think a lot of Baader-Meinhof gang members, they committed suicide around that time, and when they were in prison, and Schleyer's captors responded by killing him. And the Sun-Mercury conjunction may have an influence on France, because if we look at the French chart, one French chart is the storming of the Bastille, or when the Bastille surrendered to whoever was storming it. There was a Sun Mercury conjunction. So there is Sun Mercury conjunction within a degree, and the horoscope for the Fifth Republic, 1958, when the seal was put on the new constitution, likewise there was a Sun Mercury conjunction, again within a degree. Now the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, he has a Sun Mercury conjunction. There it is. It's very close, again within a degree. And so Macron, the storming of the Bastille, plus the Fifth Republic, they've all got Sun-Mercury conjunctions. So it may well be that this Sun-Mercury conjunction over the weekend, and perhaps into the beginning of next week, is going to have a particular impact on France. And of course, there's so much going on in France, so it's very unlikely that nothing will be going on over the weekend. So that's one country that I think really may be strongly influenced by this conjunction. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.